Good afternoon, everyone. This is Cadet Campbell, and I'll be covering flanking. The definition of flanking is a flanking maneuver is an attack on the sides or rear of an opposing force. You can find resources on this in ADP 3-90, which is offense and defensive operations for the Army. Reasoning that I'm covering flanking is because in most Army documents and training, no one addresses flanking directly. So, pretty big part of all warfare ever since the first days of the Greek hoplite. So I figured it was probably a good idea to bring it up. So in the image I'm about ready to show up on the screen, you can see clearly how flanking is visualized. So if you look at the main force is the black dots to the top, and then the red square, clearly labeled enemy, is the enemy. Now the 6 blobs, I should say, of blue forces is going to be your friendly flanking forces. So the main purpose of a flank is to initiate an attack with the black, the anvil here in this image, and then to bring around your flanking forces to try and attack the enemy from the sides or rear to force them into a decisive battle that they cannot escape from. Now, all throughout history, flanking has been a prominent part of warfare. Basically, since the day of the Greek hoplite, the main goal of any maneuvers in any sort of military situation is to get to the sides or back of an enemy to force a decisive battle. Now, the most famous incident I'm sure many of us have seen is Band of Brothers, when Lieutenant Dick Winters attacks the artillery pieces on Point du Hoc. Now, when that happens, you can see that he initiates the attack from the front with small arms fire along with supportive fire from a .30 caliber machine gun. After they initiate the attack, he takes 2 opposing pinchers and wraps around the back and secures the artillery pieces successfully. Now, this is an excellent example that is still used to this day at the infantry school in Fort Benning, which I'm sure many of us will learn about further in Army careers. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what reason or why at all would I use a flank? Now, most of the time you can use a flank for any situation militarily, but probably more specifically you'd use it in a situation where you, the attacking force, are outnumbered by the defensive force. In this situation, a flank can greatly increase the effectability of your smaller forces that you have at your hand. So for example, let's say you're doing a platoon attack element against a company of an enemy force. You could use just one squad in the front to initiate the attack, drawing all the enemy's fire and attention, while you use your other 2 squads to flank around to the sides or the rear of the enemy. In this instance, the enemy is caught off guard and can be easily overwhelmed even though you are at a disadvantage numerically. This is why flanking has so often been the key to initiating a successful campaign, such as the German campaign of 1940, where even though the Germans were far outnumbered, both with armor and infantry against the Allied forces of France and Britain, they were still effectively able to outflank all the forces that were trapped in Belgium and drive to the coast, securing German victory over France. This is an excellent example and a classic example that is used throughout the rest of history. At the Battle of 73 Easting, where the American forces, far outnumbered by the Iraqis, were able to flank around using the terrain to their advantage and destroyed the much-feared Republican Guard of Saddam's forces. And even up into the most recent American campaigns in 2003 in the Iraqi invasion, where even though the coalition forces were outnumbered, they used successful flanking maneuvers that leapfrogged through the country to outflank the much more numerous Iraqi forces. So far, I've been talking about the offensive with a flank, how you can use a flank to your advantage to attack. But how do you defend from a flank? Which is just, if not more, vital than knowing how to initiate the flank. Now, the most common way would be terrain, using gorges, cliffs, hills, rivers, any natural obstacle you could possibly put between you and an enemy maneuver to your side or rear. But maybe you don't have that advantage. Maybe you're on the plains of Iowa and you don't know what to do. In that instance, the best thing to do is do exactly what the enemy's doing. Use a small force to the front to give the appearance that you are stationed solely to the front, while increasing your side positions, essentially a counterflank to the initial flank. In this instance, the best thing to do is simply build up your forces on the sides with machine guns, grenade launchers, anything you can use, claymores even, or maybe sandbags, rucks, just something to put a bigger obstacle between you and the enemy. So as the enemy attacks, the flanks are thrown off, and then you can counterflank to the enemy because now they're in shock from the attack that they initiated. So by using the offense for the defense, you can effectively wrap around and counterflank the enemy, increasing your capability of victory in this instance. So overall, flanking is the most effective military maneuver that I think anybody can use at just about any level. Even if you just have a small squad-sized element, flanking can far increase your chances of victory over any opposing force. Now obviously flanking has its limitations, but that's up to you as a future army leader to determine whether or not flanking is an effective maneuver for your situation.